Gustavo Razzetti, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I'm thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
I'm super excited, Mahan. So looking forward to a conversation and see where it's going to take us.
Same here, Gustavo. I really enjoyed remote, not distant, design a company culture that will help you thrive in a hybrid workplace. Most especially because most of the people I interact with and my clients are starting to look like me, pulling their hair out, trying to make this hybrid thing work. So I know you've done a lot of great work on organizational culture and hybrid. But before we get to that, Gustavo, would love to know whereabouts you grew up and how your upbringing has impacted who you've become.
Absolutely. I'm originally from Argentina and I've been living in the States for, I don't know, I lost count because now I'm in Chicago. I lived in Los Angeles and before that, like 5 years in New York. But if we want to go back into the future, I would say that one of the key things that shape my behavior and approach to life work, it's how I was raised. And I was raised in an environment of lots of freedom. So we were seven, we are seven siblings. I'm a number five. So you're not one of the first that are take all the attention, neither the ones that come late that want all that. So you're not in that fight struggle. So I learned a lot about taking care of myself, from cooking very early to doing lots of stuff, traveling, exploring, being let alone in my house, or going like doing things that for today kids would be like, oh, that's dangerous. So I think that basically opened my mind into exploring, traveling, and taking risks and screwing up, but then being able to find my way back home, so to speak.
Yeah, before having kids, Gustavo, I didn't believe much in birth order's impact, but I've seen real impact of birth order and the freedom that kids end up having. But you also have had experience in different cultures. And I wonder if that influences your sensitivity and ability to sense and adjust to different organizational cultures.
Absolutely. I think that reading first and traveling and eating basically opened my senses since very young. And now, for example, people say, "Hey, you like to cook? What do you cook?" And I cook food from European countries, Asian, different places because I like to explore. No? So I think that mentality helped me, but also when it comes to the work, since very beginning, I was involved in regional, first in Latin America, then global, involving people from the US, involving people from Europe. So I had to travel a lot for work, and that helped me like have what I call like a visitor or traveler more than a tourist mind, which is if you go to a place, I go there without instructions. I don't want to go to the whatever list the New York Times or anyone kind of publish. I usually follow the locals. No, I see if the locals go and eat in this place might be good. So I like to explore the culture in that way, and I bring that same sense of exploration to my work with companies, as well.
Yeah, and I wonder about that, Gustavo. I was thinking about it that my wife and I went to Rome for a great trip, and this is before a GPS was on every phone. And some of the best experiences we had were as a result of getting lost in the tight corners of Rome. And even that fact that in many instances we don't get lost, we don't get a chance to experience cultures when there is just purpose behind every visit and every place we end up going.
Yeah, that's great. I've been there myself. Getting lost is my one of my core skills. But I'm here. I am, and actually, once I got lost in the Patagonia in the middle of a storm, I had to survive in the mountain without proper clothing, without food, without water, and I learned a lot. But I think to your point, getting lost is critical. But what happens if we connect this to the work I do, and probably you do as a consultant? When you work with companies, they want to understand what's the outcome going to be. They want to focus on the end result, the perfect travel experience, rather than going through the pain of getting lost. And when you start working on culture, you don't know where you're going to end. No? So companies say, well, what's the where's the finish line? What I'm going to get? What's the real outcome? I say, we don't know. That's what we're doing the project. So don't rush it. Enjoy the journey if you want to drive your culture into a better future.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it, and you've spent a lot of time focusing on organizational culture. Now, Gustavo, culture has been for the past couple of decades almost a buzzword where, everyone puts up culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, all kinds of statements about culture. How do you view organizational culture, and why have we made so little progress with respect to culture when all leaders seem to be talking about it consistently?
You made me laugh for many reasons, but I'm going to start with because you read my book, that I don't like the phrase that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Reason one, because we need both, but most importantly, if it comes to build on that metaphor, I would say that culture needs to be fed during breakfast, lunch, dinner. No, culture is something that we never stop working, and that's basically the most important thing. You use the word talk. Everyone talks about culture, but we need to fit it. We need to work on it. One thing that happens to me without finger pointing is many times we get hired, my team and I, to work with different types of organization. Culture is a number one priority, but then the teams don't have time to get together in a workshop or in a room or to discuss, or they get interrupted. So I say, hey guys, hello, I'm not. I'm here because you need me to be here. I can be somewhere else, so my life's not going to change. But if you really want to take care of your culture, stop getting in and out of the room. Stop checking your phone. Stop canceling events, and let's put the effort. And I think that's one of the key challenges. People want to improve culture, but when they get in the process, they realize how hard it is. It's like getting fit. Everyone wants to go to a gym because we all want to be in shape, we all want to be healthy, we want to look good. However, getting there, that's the tough part. No? It requires discipline, effort to show up, and then people don't want to do it. So you got your answer.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work, as you also consistently say in your book too, but it is worth that effort. And this transition that we have had, Gustavo, for many professional services and professional organizations, having been virtual for at least a portion, if not
Mhm.
most of the pandemic, now many organizations coming back to some version of what they call hybrid. This becomes an opportunity to reset that culture. So, how do you define hybrid? And is that going to be, in your view, the future of work? Because I still to this day run into executives that talk about the fact that their productivity initially post going to virtual went up, but they believe their productivity of their teams has gone drastically down, and they can't wait until they march everyone back to the office as many of days of the week as they can. Some of them are happy with the economy slowing down because now they believe they are going to have the leverage. So, will that hybrid be the future of work in your view? And what is hybrid work?
Good point. I think that hybrid is definitely the future for the next months, years, and it's here to stay. And what is hybrid? There are many models. Now I described there are many ways to do hybrid, but you need to do it well within design and intentionality in order to get the best of both worlds. For me, the definition of hybrid is when you can get the benefits of flexibility from working remotely, not just from home, because working you can working from anywhere and working whenever people want, but also using the physicality, the office or not office, but that moment in which we get together to build culture with intentionality. So the answer of, hey, 3 days a week in the office too, that's not hybrid. That's a structure that basically, because we were raised in a rigid 9 to 5 that wasn't ever five, no, 9 to 7, whatever. Now we're looking into dictate another model. Hybrid requires flexibility. Hybrid requires that different people like to work at different times, at different moments, and that's okay. And bringing that flexibility together with lots of discipline that companies use lack. No? So I think one of the biggest challenges is managers were used to lead by visibility. Visibility. They wanted to see people and see not just in the case, hey, I'm in my corner office and I can watch my team. They're typing, doing stuff, talking. They're busy. A observation in terms of how many people send emails, how many, who's the first person to arrive to the office and the last to leave. That basically is what you said, that people believe, oh, they are productive. Hello, there's no research that shows that being busy it's productive, but there's a lot of research that shows that most companies and most individuals' productivity went up when people started working remotely. And the question that leaders need to do is why. It's why, because people started to be more mindful about how to use their time, because they save time in the commute, because there are fewer distractions. At the office, there are lots of distractions. Some are good, but many are distractions. So I think that my biggest advice is, rather than jump into what's your new model, to your point, reset your current culture. Think about what used to work before the pandemic, what worked during the pandemic, and bring them together. This is not about forget everything that happened in the past 30 years, but it's not also to get rid of all the lessons and learnings that we got from the pandemic.
And that is the most important step, and step number one of your book, resetting that culture. And what I find to be really important is you talk about the five mindset shifts. The first one being making sure that it's a culture by design, in
Mhm.
that there has to be intentionality behind it. The question I have in my mind, Gustavo, is how, where does that intentionality emanate from? Is it something that the CEO and the senior leadership team get together and think it through? Is it intentionality that is initiated at the team level? Where does that intentionality for the culture start?
I think it's not necessarily top down, but it's definitely inside out. So every member that has good things to share should basically contribute. So the first thing that needs to happen, I think, of course, any company needs to have at a top level certain guidance or guardrails that apply to the whole organization. But in the new environment, it's even more important than ever to get feedback and input from employees. So the backlash that Google and Apple got was when basically their CEOs were making decisions about the future of work, and people say, "Hey, we don't want to do this. We don't want to do that." So basically, you're clueless. But it wasn't just about flexibility because people are lazy, like some people like to portray it. It was about, hey, minorities felt more protected, felt safer working remotely. There were fewer aggressions. People that have complex family situations, smaller kids that need to take care, or they're taking care of their senior family members. Well, they need different approaches to work. And now that they realize, hey, that's possible, they don't want to let go of that. That is not against the company benefit if we can use it and funnel it the right way.
It's beautifully put, Gustavo, in that in many of the conversations that I have, again, when people are confiding in me, it's as if they view the employees as being lazy in not wanting to go back to the old routines. It's not that. There are advantages that people have gained, both from a life perspective and uh, a cooperation even perspective, where some of the minorities, some of the women have had opportunities that they wouldn't have had normally in the organization. So it requires a different view. But you mentioned this flexibility, and you keep mentioning the discipline that needs to go along with it. How can you balance that? How can leaders think about the flexibility and then marry that with discipline? Some of it is individual initiated, some of it is organizational and team discipline.
Absolutely. I think that, thank you for noticing that. And that's what I call the biggest paradox of remote work. So sometimes when we use the word, let's say, flexibility or freedom, leaders immediately equate that to, hey, this is going to be chaotic. People are going to do what they want. No, with flexibility and freedom comes ownership. No, when you're giving, I talk about my when I was a kid, I was raised in a freedom environment, but I became really with no one had to be there on top of me if I was doing my homework or doing other things because I became accountable. And that's where we need to coach people. Discipline basically balances that. So if people can start working maybe at 7 a.m. because that's their preference, and some other team members wants to work starting at 9, then we need to set certain rules. For example, from 10:30 to 1 p.m., whatever that time is, we are all going to block time. So everyone's available. If I need to talk to my team, if we need to regroup, if we need to touch whatever, people are available. So it's not chaotic. It's finding that connection. If people are going to work at their own time, there's going to be a lot of asynchronous work. Okay, we need to become very disciplined into how we document things so people can find the information, they can get the background, they can get the input they need, they can make decisions monitoring what everyone's input was. So that's kind of the balance that we're looking for.
That is powerful, Gustavo. And in my interactions, that is exactly pinpointing the reason why some of the attempts at hybrid have not worked, where the systematic thinking in incorporating a certain level of discipline, whether with respect to hours worked or with respect to systems of documenting in an asynchronous way, have not been thought through. So flexibility is seen as chaos, whoever do whatever they want. That's why, yeah, that's why the leaders are like, let's get everyone back to the office. At least that was working better, but they're not doing hybrid well.
Absolutely. And there's another side to the story that people don't want to talk about, which is the leader side of the story. I'm not blaming them on them. And of course, each company is it's unique. I talk a lot about the biases that force leaders to have people in the office. But there's something that people don't address first is trust or the lack of trust. Leaders don't trust their people. They had to trust people during the pandemic to work from home, to work remotely, because they didn't have an option. Now that people have proven that they kept businesses alive, people say, hey, you know what? I don't trust you. I want to see you. There's also another element to that, which is if you're the CEO or senior executive in a team, what happens? You have a huge, comfortable office. You have an admin that brings you coffee, food, lots of stuff. While if you're in a house, you need to go and take care of your own printer. The CEO needs to go and print, and the paper gets jammed. Have you ever seen a CEO printing in a corporate world? No. So they want also a little bit of that comfort, and no one wants to address yeah, being at the office, it's really comfortable if you're one of the higher ups. But for many people, they don't see much benefit. The gas is getting expensive. They waste 1, 2, 3 hours to commute. They have to pay for food rather than cook at home. And also, is hey, I'm doing the same work that I can do that I used to do for 2 years at home. So what's the point? So the question is, I was talking to a company that they say, hey, my CEO is worried because we offer flexibility, but people are not showing up. No one comes to the office. So I say, let's talk about metrics. So they're a financial services firm. So we started going one by one, and all the metrics, sales, productivity, profit, retention, blah, 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 not only in employee retention, they were green, green, green. So I say, well, so your company is doing great. You're growing like 2 digits. So well, but we want people. So I say, why don't you change the conversation from I want to see my people to why would people want to come to the office? So are you going to do a nice lunch to build teamwork? Are you going to do like a team offsite? We're going to focus into retrospective, what's working, what's not. Let's do it. Are you going to do something to introduce the new team members that no one knows and give awards? Or so use that time in person mindfully, not just because the CEO wants to see people.
Yeah, and it requires genuinely trying to see things from the other person's point of view, not from a cynical perspective that they don't want to come to the office because they don't want to work or they don't want to be held accountable. Seeing it from their point of view, and then because step two, You do mention reimagining that shared future requires co-designing, and that co-designing really requires design thinking of the experience that all the employees have. It's not just one person's point of view and perspective. It requires shared conversations.
Absolutely. And in the end, is once you reset your culture, the immediate step two is what future do we want to build together? Not just what do we want. It's not about the tasks that I do within my team, no, every day. That's yeah, getting stuff done. It's more about what are we trying to achieve here? Why do we show up to work? Either in a physical environment or in front of a camera or in front of my computer or phone on my own. And I think that's where more companies are lacking. So the pandemic basically shake things up. It accelerated because it was already happening, a revolution where people are reflecting about what does it mean to work, not just my job, but my relationship to work. And people say, hey, I spend one third or more of my day there. Well, I want to get something. It needs to be meaningful. There's an interesting take talking about the future that it's not just young people that don't want to go back to the office. The people in the 50s, like me, they don't want to go back to the office either. Now, the new wave of the great resignation, it's in the management level. Now there are managers, because we talk about employees leaving. No, now managers are leaving by the thousands because they say, hey, it's like imagine that your kids are moving somewhere else to have a better life and say, why I'm staying? I mean, so the employees are leaving and managers stand and say, hey, they're wrong, and until say, no, maybe I'm wrong and need to leave too. So I think that what kind of workplace do we want to build? What impact do we want to create as a business? And then that's where people are going to be part of your company or they're going to go and join someone else.
Yeah, that outcome oriented conversations and real co-designing with everyone takes effort and time, but that's why this is an opportunity to reset that culture. One of the things that you also touch on in your book, Gustavo, that has been a challenge for organizations is that they had a certain set of rituals pre pandemic. Some of those rituals didn't carry through. They ended up starting some new rituals when people
Mhm.
were working virtually. Now, this hybrid environment, again, gives them the opportunity for rituals. In your view, what's the importance of rituals? And in thinking about a hybrid work environment, how would the approach to rituals for the organization be different?
Yeah, sure. One of the moving to the next step, creating that sense of belonging. No, so that's one of the key elements of culture. We want to be accepted by others. We want to feel that we belong. If we don't have that feeling, we feel insecure. We feel threatened, and then we want to either go somewhere else or we shut down as human beings or become very defensive. So the point about belonging, it's where rituals come to play in a very important thing. Many companies, I'm not criticizing, but they started doing lots of icebreakers and fun stuff via Zoom, and it was all right. But at some point, it became very repetitive. It became very short-term minded, and people got basically tired. It wasn't fun at all any longer. So I think that we need to let go of certain practices that maybe they don't have any sense. Maybe be more mindful. Having rituals doesn't mean that you need to have 20 rituals. Maybe one or two are okay. Maybe once a week, it's okay to get and bring the team together. And that's where companies get stuck into, hey, you say, let's do rituals, and they start basically creating a new burden, no, in terms of their teams. The other elements, rituals need to be optional. When you're creating something and it feels forced into you, then you shut down, you reject it, you become defensive. So some rituals maybe are great for extroverted, and people that are more introverted, they don't want to join, and that's okay. Don't force them into. But even better, let the team design their own team rituals. No, so when you have a ritual created by the CEO, it's going to feel like foreign. It's like a parent designing the party for your teenagers. They're going, no, that's boring. That's not what we do. That's not the music that I would like to hear. No? So I think that Rituals need to be intentional, they need to be selective in terms of not too many, but also be designed or at least co-designed with your team members.
And those rituals play an important role in setting the culture. And you keep writing about this, you keep emphasizing it, and I want to underline it, Gustavo, the intentionality behind it. Some of the ongoing rituals that at least some of the clients that I interact with and people I interact with, I see it's almost like carry over rituals. Things are continued just because that's how they were done 6 months ago, that's how they were done a year ago, rather than with intentionality thinking this is an opportunity to start from a blank sheet of paper, think through some of the rituals, test, see what gets traction, what doesn't, stop the ones that don't get traction. So, intentionality is something you mentioned with respect to culture and all aspects of it, including rituals, that I think is really important and missing in some of the conversations and some of the actions in the organizations I interact with.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, rituals, people, as I mentioned, confuse icebreakers or games with rituals. Now, rituals are more well defined, but most importantly, they need to be designed with an end in mind. So basically, what's the problem that we're having as a culture? Do we feel distant? Do we feel that we're lacking like something in common? Do we miss that we have too many new team members and we don't get to know each other well? Do we feel what? Do we feel upset, defensive, and then create a ritual to act on that? So it's not copy paste. Not only the rituals that you used to have before working remotely and then hybrid, but don't copy paste rituals from other companies. That's critical.
Yeah, yeah, no, go ahead.
Sorry. And there's something interesting. Rituals can also be an opportunity to provide physicality in which we don't have that opportunity to be present. So there's the tech software company manufacturer GoToMeeting and many other platforms. What they do is, because they are saving lots of money, they don't need to have to as much office space as they use. Now they distributed that part of that budget into team building, a ritual, a culture building activities. And now people get together at a local level. So we live in certain area in New York or LA, and people get together to do fundraising, to do community events, for example, like participating in a community kitchen and a food bank and helping people that are struggling. And that brings the culture together. Those are rituals that their employees design, and it connects the people that probably they don't work together, but they happen to live in a similar physical region. Similar to that, a Dropbox, they used to give a box of cupcakes to their new employees because one of Dropbox values is a smiling cupcake. And when people started working remotely, that was gone. So what happened? So they came up with an interesting idea, which is they send people to their homes a box with all, instead of giving them the cupcakes, they give them the ingredients and a recipe so people can cook. There are many things about that. First, when you receive a gift and you're working remotely, that's the physicality that brings your company into your own hands. That's super powerful. But also the idea that you have to cook. We know that many people during the pandemic starting to experiment baking and stuff. That's also interesting. But you can share the whole process, baking the cupcakes, eating them on your own or with your neighbors or family members, and you're still being in that connection with your team members. And if you're an ugly baker and your cupcakes look bad, people are going to have fun and you're going to start conversation among team members. So I think that's kind of the important thing about what are we trying to build and how we can use rituals to create that connection.
Yeah, what great examples of how rituals, even small rituals, can play a significant role in that connection and sense of belonging people can feel to their organization. And these are simple to implement and test, and then see how it works with the team members. Now, another thing you mentioned in sense of belonging, reigniting belonging, Gustavo, is culture of collective feedback. Now, collective feedback was even hard in person. It was very hard remote. It's going to continue being hard in hybrid. How would an organization go about encouraging and having a culture of collective feedback rather than just even sometimes getting managers to give feedback is hard, let alone collective feedback?
Absolutely. I think it's important for the audience when we talk about collective feedback is traditionally companies focus on the one-on-one into managers giving their direct response feedback. And while that's important, one of the issues that it puts too much attention on the individual, well, we need to fix the team. So sports team, especially the most effective, they give feedback to the team. How can we play better? They don't say, hey, Gustavo, Mahan, Jane, you are not doing a good job. So it moved from the blaming who's the weakest link into the team versus how can we all improve? Because in the end, many times performance issues are not based on one person does, they're the consequence of a system that's not working. So collective feedback help us uncover what can be improved at a system level, at a collective level, and active. We talk about sports and the same way that walking every day and walking long distance or running, it's hard. You don't start by running a marathon. You start by running maybe 1 mile and see how it works. So I think that building collective feedback is building a different muscle that's going to be hard, but through time, it's easier to build than people think.
And it is important to your step number four, which is rethinking collaboration. If we want people to collaborate more effectively, we have to think about feedback systems as working in a team as opposed to focused on individuals. Now, with the collaboration, you also talk about default to async. One of the challenges that I have seen is now professionals are spending almost 22 hours a week in meetings because scheduling meetings is pretty easy. Click, click, you got a Zoom meeting and call people into it. So, how have you seen the application of async done well in rethinking collaboration?
It, I think the key point is basically understand what do we mean by async and when to use async. So both synchronous communication, like we're doing now, talking at the same time, it's valuable for urgent matters. You know, there's an emergency, we can fix it faster over the phone than, hey, I'm going to send you an email, check it when you have it, and the house on fire. It's also great for building relationships. But then async is really good for most collaboration projects, even for making decisions, because you take the time to reflect, you get everyone's input. The point is, like everything in the workplace, we hear someone say, hey, let's default to async. And that became the mantra. Many clients were telling me, oh, we're async first. And I say, oh, great. What does that mean? No, well, it's different. And I say, wait, but how do you do it? Did you train people? What practice? Did you identify what was working before? What are the things you need to let go of? Which meetings you want to eliminate? Do you have a criteria for people to see, hey, can I opt out from meetings? No, no. So, well, you're not, you're saying that you're practicing async. It's like having a growth mindset or psychological safety, all the things that people throw there because they look good, but just words, as you said at the very beginning of this conversation. No? So I'm building on that teaser that you said there for me.
Yeah, and what you are saying in that async is not just the implementation of tools or saying that you are doing async. I've seen organizations set up a few tools and say, yes, we also do async. It's as if it's something on the side that's we've got that too. It's a feature. It's not necessarily a feature. You also, Gustavo, mentioned the releasing of agility, which is step five, and
Mhm.
autonomy as the new engagement. So I find that to be powerful, yet in doing that, there have to be uh, alignment parameters for the team and therefore for the organization to succeed. So, how can leaders think through releasing agility, giving teams and individuals the autonomy that's needed, but keeping them aligned.
The point is aligned or what? Align of the future. What's our purpose? What are we trying to do? Align on goals, but then let people do whatever they need to get those goals. You know what I mean? Uh, it's if I always say that leaders try to be a coach and they also try to be a player. You cannot be both. Either you're on the field, whatever sports you choose, playing the match, or you're on the sideline. You cannot be in both places. So once you agreed on the strategy, how we're going to tackle this game, let people play. That's autonomy. So no one's going to tell people if they want to kick the ball, if they want to grab it, whatever they want to, where are they going to run, how they're going to run. That's up to them. That's the point of how they are all playing together, but people know how to get there to achieve that goal better than anyone else.
Yeah.
And I think that on the other hand, each person, that's why we hire people. No, companies have thousands of employees. So you don't hire and pay them as much money just to tell them how to do their homework. No, you hire them because they can bring new things to the table. Actually, one of the things I always emphasize and why companies are struggling because they don't have expertise inside the house. HR, most of them have been born and raised, like most of us, in office-centric workplaces. So they don't know how to do async, they don't know how to do hybrid. So bring people from other teams that have the expertise of working fully remotely for years, even before the pandemic, or people that have been doing some kind of hybrid, and let them infuse some new practices and new tools. Learn from them. So don't try. That's a part of autonomy, letting people shake how we work. But of course, in the end, we're all trying to win the game. We're not playing 20 different matches.
Yeah, and as we do that, Gustavo, you had also a while back created the culture design canvas, which I had seen, worked with, referenced. I think that's also outstandingly well done. So, as leaders of a team read your book, one of the frustrations that sometimes podcast listeners share with me is they say, okay, I'm not the CEO of the organization. So
Hmm.
what can I do? Right? And in that there's one person who's the CEO, and the CEOs a lot of times say, I don't have full control, the board does, or so on and so forth.
Yeah,
But for people leading a team, they read your book, they want to reset that culture, understand the intentionality with which they need to approach it as they go through these steps. How would you recommend for them to start? Would they say, okay, we've got a 2 hour meeting where we're all going to start having a conversation and go through the culture design canvas? What would be some concrete first steps for leaders of teams within an organization to take to shift the culture and form the future culture of their hybrid team?
absolutely. I'm going to zoom back a second and build on the first part of your question, which is we don't have control. Not even CEOs, not even boards, no one has control of anything. In business and in life, I would say 70, 80, and being generous of things are out of our control. The issue is we get stuck in the things that we cannot control because it's easy. Hey, my leader doesn't do this. My leader doesn't approve this. I don't have budget. And well, I always advise team if you start focusing on you can control how each team member takes care of themselves, how they treat each other. No, for example, psychological safety. You don't need to wait for the leader to build a safe workplace. If among your team members, sorry, you start treating each other with respect, you give each other the shadow of the doubt, you give them the opportunity to share, you listen, you pay attention, you accept people who think differently than you do. So that's key. Whatever thing you're going to do in culture, you need to focus on what are the things that you can affect. Going back to the first step, I think that at an organization or team level, doing a culture reset, thinking what used to work, what do we want to be in the future, that kind of big picture, dreaming the type of culture that we want, it's critical. Then you can start going back to the culture canvas. You can start even in bigger things about what's our purpose. Even if your company doesn't have a company purpose, you can design what's the purpose for your own group, for your own team. You can focus on what's hurting us. Are we suffering from lack of priorities? Are we suffering because we don't give feedback to each other as often as we should do? Well, those are the areas. Choose your quick wins, choose your battles, and get started. Because in the end, it's about building momentum. You're building a muscle. Don't try to build the muscle overnight because you're going to get hurt. Do it little by little, but be consistent.
I love that perspective, Gustavo. As you have, I've also interacted with leaders at all levels of organizations, and people typically find reasons why it's their board, it's their senior leadership team, it's the CEO, it's this person or that. There are always things that are outside of our control, as you said, in many instances at all levels. Vast
Mhm.
majority of things are outside of our control. That doesn't become an excuse for not impacting the culture of the organization. And I believe what you've done very well with your book, Remote Not Distant, is lay out a step by step framework to start the conversation. This is
Mhm.
starting the conversation with intentionality that then helps the team create the kind of culture they want to have in this hybrid future of work. So I appreciate those insights. And now, Gustavo, in addition to your own book and the Culture Canvas, are there any other leadership resources that you recommend specifically as leaders of teams and organizations are reflecting on the future of work and creating that future with intentionality?
Yeah, for me, rather than recommending books or tools, and I can do that, I don't have an issue. And actually, I have a newsletter in which I'm always recommending someone else's book. Lately on, I started pushing like more independent authors, not the books that everyone knows. I think that sometimes we're looking for answers in the wrong place. No, we're looking for books, and to your point, my book doesn't pretend to be the answer. It was designed to spark conversations. So in the end, the energy, the raw material that's the most valuable for you to build a successful culture is within your company. So don't go and look for solutions and look for, oh, this company, this did, copy, paste, I'm going to do it, because you're going to fail. You don't know the details. You're just reading the whitewash kind of version of the real thing. Uh, Perfect. You're seeing the end destination, not the journey. It's like when you got lost in Rome, you can recommend that restaurant that you went with your wife, and they'll say, "Oh, great, I'm going to go there." But if you didn't go through the process of getting lost, then the experience wouldn't have been the same. So once again, I think that you need to start talking more to your people. You need to start listening more to your people. That's the most valuable source of learning for you to build the right culture.
That's so beautifully put, Gustavo, both with respect to the experience my wife and I had. You're absolutely right in that the process of getting lost added to the beauty of finding the spots where we ate at. And secondarily, with respect to the approach to culture and in reading your book, questions are the answer. This is
Mhm.
asking the team the questions and having the conversations to develop the muscle. Sometimes people write in and listeners write in and they want to hear the example of the company that made it work or the leader that made it work. And I think, especially on social media, that gets a lot of traction. We want
Yeah.
the one person and the one answer that they implemented that made them rich, made them healthy, made them whatever. But that is not the reality of it. It's approaching culture with the humility that the answer resides in the experience of the team trying to come up with that intentional future and those answers. And I think you do a brilliant job of laying the groundwork for leaders to do that.
Thank you. And you know, in my book there are hundreds of examples from large companies, well known, to smaller, not only at a executive level but also at a regular team level. Know what people in the smaller groups are doing. But in the end, I always caution people, don't learn from the what was behind it, why they were trying to achieve, and the thinking process, not the solution. And that's the hardest part. You know, when we talk about building the muscle, it's building that thinking muscle that got that company to come up with that solution. The solution is not the muscle. That's the band-aid. and we have too many band-aids in the workplace already.
We do. So, Gustavo, to find out both about your book, you mentioned the newsletter. We will put links in the show notes. How best can the audience find out more information about you, your book, and your newsletter?
I would say Google me. I'm not, of course, but there are not so many Gustavo Razzetti, so that's the beauty of my name. And I'm active on Twitter, not too much, but I'm active. On my handle is Gas Razzetti, so the first three letters of my first name and then my last name altogether. I'm very active daily, sometimes more than once on LinkedIn. I share lots of stuff there, like comments, articles that I write, etc. If you go to my website, we have a free blog in which you can subscribe. It's fearlessculture.design, and you can subscribe for free. I write a weekly newsletter. I post, there are a lot of tools that you can download. I have written over 600 and counting articles. So you have a lot of free content that you can get there and join the conversation, because I want to hear from you, not just read it, but also get back to me.
And I have really enjoyed both your book and seeing some of your posts on LinkedIn, Gustavo. As you said, it's a conversation, and it's a conversation that we all need to have. This is new for all of us in what we are experiencing, and it's also an opportunity. And I appreciate the kinds of frameworks that you've shared, and also the kinds of questions that you ask, along with
Mhm.
examples for people to think differently. But examples just serve as that, as examples, not something to be duplicated. So I really appreciate your great work on helping teams and organizations transition to hybrid or remote, but not become distant from each other. Thank you so much, Gustavo Rossetti.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, and I really enjoy the conversation. I think that I want to get some tips from you when it comes to restaurants. So let's continue.
Gustavo, even if you ask me, I won't tell you because I learned something from a new friend of mine. In
Okay.
that part of the joy of that food came about as a result of the hunger and the search after being lost. And if I told you that same restaurant, you would not experience it the same way as I did.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mahan. Good point.